Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for attending today's training session. This will be a very quick reference guide for required quarterly and annual reporting. I sent everyone the PowerPoint presentation. I apologize for lateness on that. PowerPoint presentation, and then a PDF that contained two separate checklists, one for quarterly reports and one for annual reports. We're going to go over those in brief detail today, just to give everyone an idea of what's required when, and then hopefully I'll be able to bring up each one of those reports as we're talking about them to give you an idea. But I did try to include some snapshots to allow for visual reference of what the actual report is that we're going to be discussing. So with that in mind, let's just go ahead and jump right on in. So today we're going to talk about the various required reports. We have two primary reporting periods, quarterly, which is a series of reports that are due no later than 30 days from the quarter's end. And as you'll see on our checklist, we've actually included for state fiscal year 15, the actual due dates for each one of those reports. But they are due no later than 30 days from quarter's end for every fiscal year, regardless of what the actual day on the calendar that falls to. And then there are year-end reports. Year-end reports are not quite as obviously not quite as frequent. They're just as numerous. Some of them are duplicative in nature, but they are also due at two different times depending on the type of report. Most of them are going to be due at the end of the state fiscal year, so within 30 days, 30 to 180 days within the close of the state fiscal year, depending on the report. We'll talk about that. And then the other will be due at the end of the agency's fiscal year. Now, a lot of our agencies that we work in partnership with are also on the same state fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. But there are a few here and there that are on their own fiscal year, and that fiscal year can be anything. It can be a calendar year. It can be November 1st to October 31st. It doesn't matter. We don't set that. We don't determine it, and it is not preventing us or you as an agency representative from conducting business with IDOT. So we'll talk about what each one of those are. A couple of things just to keep in mind. This is a work in progress. We've identified the value in having this type of a checklist published each year that identifies exactly what reports are due and exactly when they're due, provides you with just an on-hand kind of log of how well you're submitting those reports and when you're submitting them, and then also, most importantly, allows us to keep track in one central location for each report as it is submitted. It is a work in progress. It is going to be updated to ensure that it is as complete as possible. We already noticed that there was one omission from there. We're going to talk about that as well. And then we're going to try to build in as the reports evolve, or excuse me, as the checklist evolves. We're going to try and build in some past due functions for everyone, so that perhaps there's an embedded function, an embedded code in the spreadsheet that notifies you if a report due date has passed and you have not submitted a report. And again, it's a work in progress. We're constantly working to complete that and to kind of get it up to its most usable, user-friendly format. So hopefully that'll be out shortly. And Karen and I will keep you updated on that. So the first thing we're going to go over is the quarterly report checklist, and I'm going to bring that up real quick just so everyone is looking at the same page. Here is your quarterly report checklist. It's the first page of the PDF that accompanied the PowerPoint presentation today. This is exactly what it looks like. You can print this one off, or if you prefer, we can send you the Microsoft Excel version of that. That's the native form that we put it in. If you'd like that, just let your DIPIT project manager know, and we'll be glad to forward that Excel spreadsheet to you. But for right now, this is how we're going to kind of take a look at it. We're going to talk about each one of these individual forms. On the quarterly report checklist, as you're kind of just reading down that list, you'll see these are the forms that are due each quarter. 5311 request for payment, the 5311 special intercity bus request for payment if it's applicable, your DOPE OP10A if you're going to request payment for based on actuals only, your DOPE OP10B if you're going to request payment for advances only, your DOPE OP10C, OP10D, a DBE letter, a charter letter, and again we're going to talk about each one of these in greater detail, a PCOM quarterly report, your PTA reconciliation form, which is usually filled out by the PCOM, and then your Grant Funds Recovery Act report or reports if you have more than one project that that Recovery Act is applicable to. That's formally the SB 51 reports that everyone is probably familiar with up to this point. That also is due quarterly, but right now is not actually on the checklist. So there's our first revision that we have to make. We'll get that updated as quickly as we can. So let's talk about the very first one right off the bat, the 5311 request for payment and the 5311 special intercity bus request for payment if it applies to you. I'm going to do them in reverse order. The special intercity bus request for payment, first of all, the two are identical reports. There is no difference between the two except for the actual project information. The federal grant that it's paid out of and the state grant number contract, that type of information is the variable. Everything else, the reports themselves, the documents that you have to fill out, all of those are exactly the same. There's no difference between the two different types of projects. You'll only have the special intercity bus request for payment form if you have entered into a contract for a special intercity bus project that is not part of your garden variety intercity bus activity that's occurring under your 5311 program. This is something that is a set aside, a special specific project. If you don't have one, if you're not familiar with it, then it doesn't apply to you. If you do have one or you are familiar with it, then this will be that special intercity bus one will be filled out in addition to your normal 5311 component. Each one of, this is a snapshot, by the way, of the tabs included in the RFP workbook. And each one of these tabs contains in it data entry fields that you have to complete based on your information for that reporting period, except for the instructions tab that just contains instructions on how to fill out the form and then how to carry information forward from one quarter to the next quarter and then how to close out the fiscal year. But the rest of them, and the cover, I don't think there's any data entry on the cover either, but nevertheless, the rest of them contain some level of data entry component. And the data entry components will be identified by blue data fields. So when you're looking at, we're just going to take a quick look here at an actual spreadsheet. When you're looking at the spreadsheet for your 5311 special intercity bus or your 5311 general public transportation services, anything that's highlighted in blue is a data entry field. And this is where we are asking you to enter your data, complete it. Everything else is a predetermined calculated field. And all of those calculations will be made based on the data that you enter in the blue fields. This is a protected document, and we ask and in fact require that you not unprotect the document and change any of the formatting or change any of the formulas that are contained therein. It's critical that that remain intact so that the macros that lay underneath this spreadsheet can work appropriately. You'll fill out that information. The cover page pre-populates. As I said, there's no data entry required on that one. And then just a quick glance at the instructions. Again, you can, as you can see, these are activity boxes. You press the box and it'll run a quick macro that's attached to that particular box. It's exactly the same, as I said, exactly the same from the Section 5311 program and the 5311 special intercity bus projects. Those three sheets that I've identified right there, the quarterly revenue service contracts form, the payment summary form, and the cover sheet, all have an area for a signature. Each one of those pages needs to be signed, and depending on the person who's filling out the form, who's going to actually sign that form. In the instance of your quarterly revenue service contracts form. As you can see here, the signature will be by the person who prepared the form. For the cover sheet, it'll be signed by both the PCOM and the authorized representative identified in the board resolution. For your payment summary sheet, that'll be signed by the person who actually prepared the document. So that's part of your check and balance process when you're filling out these forms, is not only make sure that you're inputting the data accurately, but that when you've printed it off and you've prepared it for mailing, that you have obtained the appropriate signatures in the appropriate places. Okay, so don't forget that. And each one of these forms that we're going to talk about, most of them have a signature requirement, and we'll try to identify where you're supposed to sign on those forms. Your DOPE OP10A, again, the same situation as with the 5311 forms. There are places on the form where you're going to have to sign. The OP10A is to be filled out if you're going to request payment for that particular quarter based on actuals. You're not doing in advance, or you have not done in advance. You're actually submitting your request for payment based on actual expenses incurred during the quarter. That form is I've lost that form. That's okay. That's okay. That form is included. All of the DOPE OP10 whatever forms are all included in one big Word document, and so you'll complete that form, sign it at the bottom as it instructs, and submit that again based on actuals if you're requesting reimbursement based on actuals for that quarter. The OP10B rather, is the exact opposite. The OP10B form is the one that you'll submit prior to the quarter if you're requesting an estimate, or you're requesting an advance based on estimates. So, for example, if you're requesting an estimate for the first quarter, as you can see, hopefully as you can see right here, if you're requesting an estimate for the first quarter advance, that'll be due to us on or before, not before June 1st. So this one actually comes in before the quarter, not after the quarter. That was one of those exceptions that I kind of mentioned a little bit. Again, only going to use this if you're requesting in advance. If you're basing anything on actuals, you'll use the OP10A. Okay. The OP10C is the actual quarterly financial report. So if you have put in for an advance and received your advance, then once you have your actual expenses identified for that particular quarter that you received the advance, you'll file this OP10C form to fill out when you are submitting basically a reconciliation for the quarter that you received the advance on. So this too will be due within 30 days of the close of the preceding quarter. So if you've received a first quarter advance, which would be July through September, you'll need to fill out this OP10C and turn it in no later than December 1st, which is sometime midway through the second quarter. That's where you're just reconciling and reporting your financial activity for the first quarter where you got the advance. Okay? And again, let me see if I can find the OP10 forms that we're all talking about here. Nope, that's not it. There we go. Okay. That's the OP10A. Right there, an OP10A. And here's the area where you'll sign for that. Here's your OP10B. And for those that are able to see the title here, this is the form AppDoc 9 DOPE application. That comes with your application packet. This is part of the FY16 application. It hasn't gone out yet, but it will. And again, it would be the same for FY15. It came in with your FY15 application information. Here's your OP10D. Again, you'll fill this out for your advance requests. Here's where you'll sign it for whomever prepared it. Here's the OP10C that we just covered. The reconciliation form is basically what this is. This is where you're filing your actuals for the quarter that you made an advance request for. Okay? And it's a 3-page document. And again, at the bottom of that one, you'll sign, whomever prepares it will sign to turn that form in. Okay? Okay, moving on, onward and upward. The OP10D form, this is the quarterly reconciliation form for the DOPE program, and it's particularly important when we talk about using your DOPE funding for across multiple federal programs. But this is just basically the form that gets filled out to reconcile between your DOPE program, your 5311 program, if you have JARC and New Freedom, all of those programs. There are signatures required for this form as well. And this is an Excel spreadsheet. This is not a Word document like the other forms. This is an Excel spreadsheet. You'll fill out all of the various data entry pieces that we're talking about here. And there are some pre-calculated fields. Again, we ask that you not do anything with the formulas. But you'll fill that out. And then the PCOM will sign that, and the authorized representative will sign that as well. Same level of signature as is required on the RFP, the 5311 request for payment form, and the public transit account reconciliation form that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. And again, this is your reconciliation form. If you have JARC and New Freedom, you'll indicate your expenses and revenues in that category, or for those projects rather, excuse me. Same thing for your 5311. If you have 5311 and intercity bus, all of that stuff. Everything that you're using the DOPE program to match, you're going to indicate here. It's a basic reconciliation form, and you'll fill that out once a quarter. Okay. Okay. So that kind of covers, again, we're going to just really quickly fly through these. I know it's probably not the best tempo. I probably could slow down a little bit. But a couple things just to kind of keep in mind. Let me go back real quick. A couple of things to keep in mind. With the 5311 form, both the regular one and the special intercity bus one, those signatures are critical. Each one of those 3 forms needs to be signed for both the regular and the intercity bus project. And each one of these pages, whether signed or not, each one of the pages that you see there, with the exception of the instructions page, needs to be submitted with your RFP packet. So make sure that you're doing exactly that. You're filling out all of the necessary information, you're signing the places that are supposed to be signed, and then you're submitting the entire packet as a whole for payment. We won't consider the request for reimbursement submitted until we have a complete RFP packet. All of the information that you see there needs to be completed and submitted before we can process it. So as we kind of move forward, and we're going to talk in future sessions about grant recipient evaluations and enhanced oversight for all of our grant recipients and things like that. This is part of the thing that we're going to evaluate. Are you submitting, and we do it anyway, but we're going to evaluate this for a slightly different purpose moving forward. Are you submitting your request for payments and your required quarterly reports and annual reports on time? And for us, a completed submission or submission isn't considered received until it's complete. We're taking that approach with applications, with requests for payments, and all of the things that we're going to require. So let's make sure we keep that in mind. Same thing with the DOPE forms. Signatures are required. The DOPE forms, regardless of which one you're using, OP10A, OP10B, they're not considered complete, or not considered received, rather, unless they're complete, unless all of the information that's being asked for is provided and that the form is signed. So make absolutely certain that you're filling out all of the appropriate paperwork accurately, completely, and you're signing all of those forms. So along with, these are all the primary financial reporting forms that allow you to get paid. That's the biggest issue. You've incurred your expenses, you want reimbursed for your expenses, or in the case of DOPE, you want some help on estimated expenses in the form of an advance. These are the forms that you're going to be required to submit in order just to get paid. That's pretty important for everybody, so let's make sure we're exercising the appropriate diligence. Along with those reports along with those forms that help you get paid, are forms that transmit information to us that we then in turn have to transmit either along to another office within IDOT or up to the the FTA side of life. That's where some of these other forms that we're going to talk about come into play. The first is a DBE letter. Every quarter, grant recipients are required to report back to us on whether or not they have contracting opportunities for local disadvantaged business enterprises. For those of you that may not remember or be familiar with, the acronym DBE stands for Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. And those are local businesses that are usually minority owned. Veterans, women, various racial demographics, etc. The whole bucket that is considered minority owned. Those types of organizations, we are required by federal law to engage those organizations whenever we have opportunities to spend money in the form of third-party contracts. So if, and there's another office within IDOT that controls all of this information for the larger projects, but each federal grant may or may not have with it a level of disadvantaged business enterprise participation. That participation requirement is usually in the form of a certain percentage of your total overall project expenses have to be spent engaging in these disadvantaged business enterprises. And that's fine. We usually don't have a problem with any of that. We don't have a problem meeting those goals. And most of those goals are tied to the larger capital projects like building facilities and highways and stuff like that. However, from time to time, our 5311 operating programs will be in a position where they can go out and enter into third-party contracts. We just need to know what type of contracting opportunities are taking place, and if you have entered into a contract, that you're filing the appropriate reports if there is a DBE activity to be reported upon. We'll talk about that too. However, whether you are or not, you're required to let us know. And this is how we ask that you do that. Once a quarter, you just draft up a quick little letter that says, hey, we here in whatever county we are representing, as part of this 5311 program, do or do not have any contracting opportunities that would require participation by a disadvantaged business enterprise. And then, again, this is another work in progress. We may streamline this effort a little bit. We'll let you know how that's going to kind of pan out. But for the time being, this is how we are asking you to communicate that information to us. In the event that you are engaged in any DBE activity, you'll receive a report, a very specific report that asks very specific information as it pertains to that DBE activity. And you'll report exactly what's contained here on this list, but let me show you the actual full-size report. And that's not it. Let me show you the actual full-size report. That's not it either. Okay, so apparently it doesn't keep that report. That's okay. We don't need to see that. You'll see all of this information that they're asking about is something that you'll have to fill in. These opportunities are very, very limited in our 5311 operating world. There are only 1 or 2 within the entire state that have DBE contracting opportunities as part of their 5311 operations. So most of you, by and large, will not be exposed to this side of it for the operating side of life. You may for the capital side of life, and again, if that happens and you fall into that requirement, the forms are usually supplied for you, as well as what the requirement is, the percentage goal, and all of that fun stuff. So I just want to let you know that if it's applicable, you will be required to submit this letter as well. Along with that, as far as letters are concerned, is another certification or assurance from grant recipients that there is no charter activity taking place during that reporting period. I think if you've been through a Section 5311 compliance review or annual program review or biannual program, whatever, if you've been through any type of compliance oversight from IDOT, we talk, not extensively, but we talk a lot about charter. We've talked a lot about charter in Transit 101. We talk a lot about it over the years at the RTAC conferences. It still offers a lot of confusion when folks will solicit for services from our 5311 providers to try to determine whether or not that service meets the definition of charter or whether it's something that a 5311 provider can do. There is a charter decision tree. I will send out a copy of that decision tree to everyone at the conclusion of this meeting. It basically is just a series of questions that you ask anytime you're solicited to provide services, not on behalf of an individual, but usually group type services. If you're solicited by an agency to provide some group type services, you'll ask a series of questions, and how you answer the question, yes or no, will determine whether or not you as a 5311 provider can provide that service or whether or not it qualifies for charter. And then there are a series of steps that you would have to go through to file an exemption or an exception or solicit for willing and able charter providers in the area to offer that service themselves. Again, I apologize I don't have that up. I will send that out at the conclusion of this broadcast, so be on the lookout for that. However, if you're not doing any charter, which again, by and large, the majority of our operators do not provide charter services. If you're not doing charter services, similar to that with the DBE contracting opportunities, we just ask that you type up a very quick letter and then sign the bottom of it assuring us that you are not providing charter services or did not provide charter service during that reporting period. Very quick, very dirty, very simple and easy. Okay. The Program Compliance Oversight Monitor Report. We only have 41 attendees here today, and I noticed that there are a couple of operators and a handful of PCOMs. So you PCOMs on the call and your peers that are not on the call, all of you have to submit this report once a quarter. This is exactly what it looks like. This is a quick snapshot of the very first page. However, if we're going to look at the entire report, that's what the cover page looks like. And throughout the report, you'll see it asks for just a variety of different pieces of information about the activities that the PCOM themselves are engaged in. Now, we recognize and understand that PCOMs are more often than not engaged in simple data collection and verification efforts. We understand that. But we also put forth a few inherent requirements that PCOMs are engaged in the process of providing public transportation and in the process of planning for their public transportation programs, and this really out there and engaging the community to the greatest extent possible. And we just want to understand what those activities are, what PCOMs are doing, and then how they're kind of progressing and evolving in their role. So this is what your PCOM quarterly report looks like for those of you that may not have seen one before. Again, we hope it's very easy to fill out, very easy to understand exactly what is required, and then hopefully there are no issues with completing that report. And to date, I don't think we've gotten too many issues with it, so that'll be required as well. There is a place for PCOMs to complete their name and information, but there's no signature required. We want to know who the PCOM is, absolutely, as well as some other pertinent pieces of information, but there's no signature required for the form itself. This form, like so many others, can be emailed. Excuse me. Next up on our list is the PTA reconciliation form. This is one of everybody's favorites. Everyone loves this new form. This is basically a quarterly spreadsheet that you're going to fill out, and it has included in it a year-end tab that automatically calculates various pieces of information. Key point to remember on this, obviously the quarterly one is due every quarter, goes without saying. However, there are two signature blocks on this form. This is one of the few that actually has two signature blocks. The first is who prepared the form. We need the name and the signature for the person who actually prepared the reconciliation, and then the name and signature of the person who approved the reconciliation form. In 99.9% of the instances, the person who prepared it is going to be the PCOM, and the person who approved it is going to be whomever the board resolution identified as the certifying authority, i.e. board chair, county administrator. The titles can vary from county to county. So again, prepared by usually the PCOM, approved by usually the authorizing representative. Let me bring up the actual form to show everybody what it looks like, assuming I can find the actual form. Here we go. Okay. So this is what the form looks like. I don't know if you can see or not, but down here at the bottom we have our quarterly tabs. So whatever quarter we're in, we'll just go to that tab and fill out that information. Again, just like with the 5311 RFP form, the blue areas are the data entry areas, the white areas, or non-blue areas, are predetermined calculated areas and should not be overridden or overwritten, as it were. You'll do that for each quarter, and each quarter looks exactly the same. The primary difference is you'll notice that in the first quarter you have a PTA beginning balance. That is the balance as of the date of the first date of the quarter, which is July 1st. It's a state fiscal year, so July 1st. And then on the subsequent quarters, second, third, and fourth, that is not a data entry point. And that the reason being is this ending balance is calculated based on the information that's input, and that ending balance will carry over to your beginning balance for the following quarter. There's no need to enter that information twice. It's already right there. The year-end summary page is just what it sounds like. It is a summary of the activity that took place throughout the course of the year. The only thing that you as a grant recipient will be required to enter is the grantee name, and the fiscal year that you're reporting on. Everything else is pre-populated based on those calculations. And then, of course, like we talked about, the two primary signature blocks. You'll want to make sure that those are signed as well. So that's your PTA reconciliation account form. Oops, sorry. Okay. A question was posed that asked that I explain the amount received to date, being as of what date, and I apologize for the person that sent that in. I'll need to know which form that you were talking about. So if you want to send me that in an email, I can address that offline. But thank you for the question. Okay, the final report, quarterly required report that we're going to talk about is Grant Funds Recovery Act reports. These are due every quarter, and they are due for certain types of projects. Not every project, or not every, I shouldn't say every project, not every agreement that DIPIT enters into is required to fill out this report. However, for all operating agreements and most capital, I'm pretty sure it's all capital, but for all operating agreements and for all intents and purposes, all capital agreements, you'll be required to fill one of these out. The blue sections are the data entry sections, just like everything else that we love to do. We've shaded the data entry components in blue. The two yellow sections that you see right here, this one is a pre-populated field. The grant balance one, excuse me, I realize you can't see what I'm pointing at. The grant balance is a pre-populated calculation, so don't worry about that. And we pre-populate on the operating side that this is an operating assistance grant, so you don't have to worry about making the mistake of not checking that. This form is one that once we receive it and verify the information, we have to shoot this up the food chain to somebody in Springfield, down the legislative office, for them to calculate all of the money that we pass out throughout the reporting period to these various different types of affected agreements. It has nothing to do with anything other than we've been required by that legislative office to collect and report on this type of information. However, I do want to point out, this is required. It is required of every project. So a grant recipient will have to fill out one of these reports for each type of project that they have an agreement for. Meaning, you have a 5311 operating assistance agreement in place. You're going to fill one out for that. If you have a special intercity bus operating agreement, you're going to fill one out for that. If you have a Jarkanu Freedom operating agreement, you'll have to fill one out for each of those. In some instances, we've had several grantees who have had 5 or 6 Jarkanu Freedom agreements, 2 or 3 capital agreements, and a 5311 operating agreement. Each one of those agreements is going to require one of these types of reports. So please don't make the mistake of saying this one report covers every agreement. It doesn't. It's specific to, as you can see on this particular form here, It is specific to a contract number and a state grant number. That's what we have to track on. So if you have 10 different contracts active and up and operating, you may get 10 different reports. Again, it is required, and one of the consequences of not filling this form out is that your payment can be suspended. So that's definitely not something you want to take a risk on in this day and age, unless you have more than enough money to operate your service, in which case I'd rather come work for you. That's what the operating form looks like. This is the capital form. Again, same type of information. The yellow boxes are pre-populated, either with a calculation or just information that we want to keep exactly where it is or that can change from time to time. The blue boxes are data entry boxes that you, as the grant recipient, will fill out. You'll send this report into your project manager. Your project manager is most likely the one who's going to contact you asking you for this information in the first place. I'm going to make a plea right now on behalf of all project managers, section chiefs, bureau chiefs, and deputy directors. Please do not make us chase you down for this report. We got a lot of money that we have to pay attention to. We got a lot of grants that we have to report on for this particular activity. It is nothing short of a headache to have to chase one down, especially when we are 4 or 5 years into this requirement. So again, please don't make us chase you down. It makes us cranky, and a cranky project manager is not a happy project manager. So let's keep our project managers happy. Okay, up next, annual reports. And I asked the question, even though I can't hear anybody, if you have any questions about these quarterly reports, please don't hesitate to shoot me the question. If you sent me an email during the presentation, I apologize. I'm not going to be able to read the email. I shut down my email thing because it just likes to mess with the slideshow presentation, unfortunately. I will get to it immediately following this and answer it to the best of my abilities after that. Annual reports. Let's take a quick look at the annual form itself. Here we go. Okay. These are obviously only due once a year. And depending on the type, it's either going to be due by August 1st or due by December 31st. There's one exception to that, and that is the grantee's audit. I don't know if you guys can see that I just highlighted that section. The grantee's audit right there is not going to be required by December 31st if your agency's fiscal year ends in such a time that you would not have been able to conduct that audit within that time period. And we can talk more specifics about that at a later date, but basically we would require your agency's audit, the county audit, to be delivered to us within 18 months of the close of your fiscal year. So keep that in mind as well. Everybody falls well within that 18-month period. If not, we have been pretty good about reaching out and letting people know we have not received an audit. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, so of those reports that are due by of those reports that are due by, here we go, August 1st, the National Transit Database Report. This is something that we have to fill out once a year on behalf of all of our rural subrecipients, non-urban subrecipients. And the information that we ask for and the mechanism that we use to collect it, that particular NTD report, is included in the Section 5311 application on page 81. I don't see a page on this document. That's okay. It's page 81 to 85, depending on how your software paginated the document when you open it. It was 81 when I looked at it earlier. It's 85 right now. But this is where you'll find the report. It's actually embedded in the application. So you'll just want to go into the application, print this section off that pertains to NTD, fill it out, and shoot it up to us when the time comes. The OP9 report, which is, and let me just go through this list first. OP9 for the non-dope local match survey form. This is another one that I'm going to beg you guys to complete and fill out on time because we get tired of chasing them down. And then the final OP10D reconciliation for the year. that's all due by August 1st. Due by December 31st are the annual financial reports for the 5311 and DOPE program. And for those of you that may not be aware, this acronym here, ASRE, stands for Annual Schedule of Revenue and Expenses. It used to be called the Annual Financial Report. It may be called this whole big long acronym name right here. It's the exact same report on the DOPE side as it is on the 5311 side. This is basically a two-page document that details your revenues and expenses for your federal 5311 program and your state DOPE program. We'll also have this report coming out for the federal 5316 and 5317 programs as well. Those will be coming out very soon. DOPE financial report, same situation. You're just reporting on the state side of life. The grantee audit, we talked about that earlier, 180 days at the close of the fiscal year. The grantee's audited schedule of federal awards with CFDA numbers. And I'm going to talk out of turn here. John Morella, our bureau chief, is the finance expert, and he can speak a lot more in depth on this schedule. However, that's one of the things that needs to be included in the grantee's audit, is a schedule of all of the federal awards with the applicable CFDA numbers. That's how we, on our end, are able to identify the federal programs that we were responsible for and then reconcile to what we awarded and paid, et cetera, et cetera. And then the operator's audit. Same situation with them. Most of the stuff comes in with the annual applications, but we do require one at the close of every fiscal year as well. Okay. As we talked about with the NTD report, it is embedded in the application. Page 81, page 85, as you saw earlier, depending on how it paginates. You'll just pull that section. It's a 2 or 3 page section. You'll pull it right out of there. You'll fill out the appropriate pieces of information and usually suit it up to your DIPIT project manager. You might be asked to send it to Saul Rivas, who is our National Transit Database expert. So either or, it doesn't matter. However that goes, you'll parse that out, fill it out, and shoot it on up to us. It's a piece of cake. No signature required, to my knowledge. So that comes in once a year by August 1st. OP-10-9 form is your year-end operating data for the DOPE program. That too has to be submitted by August 1st. Let's see if I can pull that up real quick. Okay, so your DOPE OP9 is right there. Okay. Again, very self-explanatory pieces of information. This is all stuff that throughout the process of filling out your request for payments on both the state and federal side, you should be able to identify all of this information. There is a signature required on this form. The person who prepared it, we need to know who that is, just in case we have questions about the information that we see on the form itself. So please be sure to sign that and provide us with your contact information. The non-DOPE local match survey. It looks exactly like the quarterly service contract revenue form that's part of the RFP, and it looks exactly like the quarterly and annual PTA reconciliation form. We did that on purpose. We wanted to kind of keep everything as consistent as we possibly could. And again, this is an after-the-fact reconciliation of all of the local match, non-DOPE local match sources that you were able to collect on and enter into agreement for throughout the course of the previous fiscal year. This information is fed into our Rural Transit Mobility Index that is like so many of these other forms of work in progress. But as it nears closer to its final version and completion, we're going to be able to implement that and use it as a valuable evaluation tool. So this information is critical to that process as well. So please fill that out and return it, just like the SB 51 reports, where I beg you not to delay and turn those in and not make us chase you down. This is the same situation. This information comes into us, we verify it, and then shoot it over to the Rural Transit Assistance Center for inclusion in the Mobility Index, and they want to complete their work on time just as much as we do. So again, please don't make us hunt you down for this particular form. The final OP-10D, this is just basically your reconciliation form where you've reconciled all of your quarters of expenses and revenues for all of your programs, DOPE, 5311, Intercity Bus, JARC, New Freedom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where you're identifying what the actual amounts are. So you'll want to fill that out, and let me see if I can pull that up. Well, it's the same as the ordinary OP10D. It's no different. And there is a signature block on the bottom of that, one of those rare ones where we have the two-person signature, one for the PCOM, one for the authorized representative. So please make sure that you're completing that form as well. That form is also due in by August 1st, so 30 days within the close of the fiscal year. This is the annual schedule of revenues and expenses for the 5311 program. This is a two-page document. We're going to bring that one up real quick. It's in an Excel spreadsheet. I like to believe it's relatively self-explanatory. It's taking the information directly from the request for payment workbook, the revenue sheet in there, and the expenses sheets in there, and just transferring the information right over into administrative and operating columns, just like you would on the 5311 RFP. Only this is a year-end document. This has to be certified. Biggest notification here. This must be certified. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Let me try. This has to be certified by a public accountant, a CPA. So the person who prepared it and their title, and then the CPA who actually reviews it and verifies that the information is accurate. That all has to be completed in order for us to accept this form as turned in. So please make sure that you're doing that. Now you can do that in multiple ways. You can have this, as grant recipients, you can have this form completed as part of your annual audit. If your audit is going to be completed within the time frame that allows this to be submitted by December 31st, or it can be completed if you're a single pass-through operator system. It can be completed as part of your operator's audit, again, provided that this form can be completed and certified and returned to us before December 31st. Operators and grant recipients can determine that on their own. We don't set that requirement. You guys figure that out. And then the third and final option is just to have this form completed separate from any other audit activity. The other underlying rule that has to go along with signing this form and having a CPA verify the information is if the audit firm that you're using, and this goes for the audits in general, if the audit firm that you're using to conduct this audit or any other audit is also performing any other type of bookkeeping activity for your organization, you have to use a separate independent auditing firm. That's the only other big rule to kind of keep in mind. It's usually not that big of an issue, but when we get down into some of the smaller towns and some of the smaller operations, it can be a little difficult from time to time. But that's your 5311 annual schedule of revenues and expenses. Your DOPE annual schedule of revenues and expenses is, for all intents and purposes, the exact same form, just tailored to meet the requirements of the Downstate Operating Assistance Program. No different in the information that we're asking for. We're just asking for it in a slightly different manner, and we're asking for it only relative to the state program, not the federal program, where the other one is asking for information only relative to the federal program. So again, same form, same concept, same. When we talk about the signature block, the same issue with the signature. You have to get the form signed off on by your PCOM, by your CPA and the authorizing representative. Make sure that the forms are signed. We can't accept them if they're not signed. We can't accept them if they have not been approved by and certified by a CPA. So please make sure that you're doing that as well. Okay, so we covered the DOPE one. And then the agency audits. The grantee audit, as we kind of we touched on this a little bit. The grantee audit, some grantees' fiscal years end later in the calendar year. So we allow for time for that fiscal year to conclude, and then the grantees to solicit for audit services, have the audits conducted, and have the reports submitted to us. the requirement is that the grant recipient's audit have to be turned into us no later than 180, or excuse me, no later than 18 months within the close of their fiscal year. That annual schedule of revenues and expenses that we talked about for both the DOPE and the 5311 side have to be turned in within 180 days of the close of the state fiscal year. That's why it's due by December 31st. It has to be into us by the end of by that time after the close of our state fiscal year. So if you're a grant recipient and your agency's fiscal year is on a different one from the state fiscal year, you may want to have this audit conducted separately from your normal agency audit, or you may want to talk to your operator about having this information included with their agency audit. Either way, note that there are those deadlines, the difference in those deadlines. This one's 180 days from the close of the fiscal year. The agency grant recipient's audit is 18 months within the close of their fiscal year. The audited schedule of federal awards with the CFDA numbers. If we receive a grantee audit for any specific fiscal year and it doesn't include that schedule of awards with the CFDA numbers, it can't be considered complete for us, for our intents and purposes. You'll have to identify for us why that wasn't done, first and foremost, and then more importantly, you'll have to ensure that it's completed in future audits. So usually, again, this isn't that big of an issue. It's usually something that's conducted as part of the normal audit process, particularly for those agencies who receive more than $750,000 in federal funds throughout any fiscal year. If it's not, just again, make sure that your auditors understand that that's a requirement and that they need to do that. And then finally, the operator audit. Most of the operators include their audits with applications. Most of the operator fiscal years are on the same as the state fiscal year. Might be one or two that vary here and there, but for all intents and purposes, they follow the same fiscal year. That being said, same situation. We expect that the operator is going to submit their audit within no greater time period than 18 months from the close of their fiscal year. That is less likely to occur than on the county level, but by and large, most of our operators are able to submit the annual schedule of revenues and expenses for 5311 and DOPE and their agency audit within 180 days of the close of our state fiscal year. So if that's not happening, trust me, we will be out to let you know. Russell Flincham is the guy who these days is heading up that effort. So if you hear from Russell and he asks you for this information, please be sure to give him that information. Now again, I know we talked very quickly about all of these forms. I hope that that having the forms there so you could actually see what they look like and be able to identify where they are within your library of forms was helpful. It was just a very quick snapshot of what's required. One of the things that we are going to do moving forward is we're going to send out, everybody got this form in a PDF. This is the actual checklist. Everybody got the checklist forms in a PDF. We're going to, as we revise this, hopefully within the next few days, we're going to send out this form again. If you prefer, we can send it out in an Excel spreadsheet, but more than likely we'll go ahead and print this off into a PDF form, much like we did this one, and send out the revised version. If you want it in a PDF spreadsheet, then please contact your project manager and let that person know, and we would be glad to provide that as well. As this checklist evolves and we build in some more functionality, it will migrate away from a PDF form and into an actual Excel form. So keep your eyes peeled for that one up and coming. That's pretty much all I have to cover today. Once again, when I send out the charter question tree that I talked about, I will also include a link to the YouTube channel. I did record this presentation, so we'll post this to the YouTube channel. I will also include a link to the survey. I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who's been submitting input via that survey. It's been very, very helpful. Don't be afraid to tell me what I'm doing wrong, or what you think I'm doing wrong, or what you think we need to do differently. I take that very seriously, and I welcome every bit of it, regardless of how critical it is. So please continue that process for me. And as always, if you have any questions about these forms or any of the other requirements or anything that we talked about today or talked about in previous presentations, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or your DIPIT project manager. We'll be glad to help out with any information that we possibly can. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time out today to attend. I'll post this information out as quickly as I possibly can, and we will see everyone next month. Thanks.